In our gospel this morning, Jesus, you could say, takes us to prayer school. He is teaching us what Christian prayer is all about. The words of the Our Father are God's own instructions on prayer. And each phrase in this prayer is full of wisdom, and we could spend hours tearing each one of them apart. But also Jesus knows that because we're human beings, we tend to fall into routines. So even though he gives us these perfect words to pray with, he knows that chances are we will have a tendency to just learn them by heart and then mindlessly rattle them off. And so he also teaches us two attitudes that should form the background for our prayer life. These attitudes, if we keep them fresh and make sure that they are part of our prayer won't become empty and boring shells, but will always be living and powerful force as it was for Abraham. The first attitude is persistence. And we see this in both the first reading and the gospel today. I like Abraham in our first reading today because he challenges God. But the important thing is his persistence is not gone unrewarded. And if we notice, God never got upset with him, never got mad at him with his persistence. Then in the gospel, we hear the friend who is persistent in trying to get bread that he needs to feed a visitor. So should our prayer be this persistent. In being persistent, as the friend was in the parable in the gospel, we give God more freedom to act in our lives because our desires get more in sync with God's. The second attitude is confidence. Since we live in a fallen world, we sometimes project our own imperfections onto God. We think that he, like us, is selfish, easily angered, resentful. As a result, sometimes we hesitate to open our hearts to him in our prayer. But Jesus tears down these misconceptions. God is our Father, a better Father than even the best earthly father. So if earthly fathers know how to be generous and wise to their children, can we expect anything different from God? He won't give us a stone when we ask for bread. When we begin to understand what Christian prayer is, and we give it the proper place in our lives, we become much more stable, joyful, and energetic people. But one of our problems we have with society today is that we are out of balance. In the past, before we had electricity and internal combustion engines, people were forced to follow a more natural pattern of life. Day and night mattered. It took time to communicate and to travel, so it meant that there was more time to reflect on life's mysteries and enjoy life's simplest pleasures. Our scientific and technological advances have changed a lot of things. It's now possible to live at a neck-breaking pace in which we become enslaved to our own to-do lists. How many of us out there have a smartphone or a tablet, or we use a computer? If we go on vacation, how many of us take those things with us? I know personally, if I leave my computer or my smartphone at home, I'm lost. I don't know what to do. So now it's necessary for us to choose to follow a healthy rhythm of life. Many people don't know how to defend themselves against this slavery, which is why psychologists today are dealing with what they call a literal plague of stress and depression. But Christian prayer, confident, persistent, personal conversations with God is one of the weapons that God gives us to keep us human in this mechanized culture. Whenever we turn to God in prayer, we put our minds and our hearts in contact with the very source of life, beauty, and truth. And that refreshes our human soul. When stress, discouragement, and frustration start to clog our minds, we don't need to turn to working harder or going to entertainment that is more distracting to our lives. What we need to do is to stop and to pray. I'm not going to lie to you and say it's easy, because it's not. But it also doesn't take a major effort for us to move to prayer. If we're not praying, we can simply each day, either maybe first thing in the morning or first thing at night, just take a couple of minutes and be alone with God. If we are praying, It's as simple as increasing the amount of time that we spend in prayer, or maybe changing how we pray. Today, in response to Christ's reminder about the nature of Christian prayer, let's renew our own commitment to earnestly work to take time every day to be alone with God, and to renew our souls so that our lives can run more smoothly the way God has designed them to.